Well, I hate to disappoint you, but we're not in sunny South Africa, simply because I have an M235i outside my front door and have done for the last 2 months. It's a cracking little car and the perfect car for the purposes of showing you how to drift a rear-wheel drive machine. It's a video I've been asked 1,000 times to produce, although I did actually do one many years ago. Neil, cut to the footage of the E39 M5 with me with the beard and all that. Yeah, okay, do that. I had a conversation with JF about how it wasn't really reasonable for me to fly to Cape Town to spend a day driving a car which was actually outside my front door. That seems a bit silly now because I love Cape Town. Look how beautiful that footage is and those red cars drifting around the town in the sunshine. We're in North Wales at Anglesey Circuit. You can hear that squeaking. That's the 50-mile-an-hour wind coming in at the doors. But that shouldn't matter because we're going to be inside the car, well I am anyway, drifting and showing you how to go sideways safely in a sensible place like a racetrack. Now this whole drifting lark begins before you even drive the car. So let's start sensibly. First of all, you'll notice we're not on a public highway. I can't stress that enough. If you want to learn how to make a car go sideways, don't do it on the public highway. Go to a circuit, go to an open airfield, go to somewhere where you can rent the space and do it properly. The next thing, make sure you're sitting in the correct position. For me, personally, get nice and low in the car. You have a better feel for what the car's doing around you if you're low. So the first thing I do is I get in the car and I move the seat to the lowest possible position. I then get my feet just right on the pedals. This is an M235i with the manual gearbox. I've got 3 pedals, perfect for skidding about. I make sure that my left leg is not quite at full extension on the clutch. Not quite, but almost. At that point, I work on the wheel, okay? The wheel needs to be quite far back towards my chest, not too high, not too low. If it's too low, I'm obviously going to struggle navigating the wheel down below here because I've got some important apparatus down here that I don't want to get damaged, okay? If it's too high, I'm reaching too high and I can't get to the top of the wheel again. So it's all about comfort. Get it somewhere about the middle. The way to test is that you should be able to rest your wrists on the top of the wheel with your arms with a bit of a bend in them. Okay, that's about right. This M235i has a great adjustable driving position. It's perfect for this. We cannot, sadly, do oversteer with all that lovely traction control and stability control mechanism working. So let's turn it off. There's a button here that says off. It now says DSC off on the dashboard, so we're without assistance. Next thing, roll forwards. Now when I shot this video before in the old M5, that was my M5, that was quite a brave thing to do, wasn't it, to wreck my own tyres. I acknowledged 3 points of the drift. Making the drift happen, sustaining the drift, and then gathering up from the drift. And do you know what? Even though that was 5-6 years ago, fundamentally my attitude towards it hasn't changed. So, I'm still going to work according to 3 elements of the drift. And the first one is making the car oversteer, making it go from a normal cornering stance to make the rear axle carve a wider line than the front axle. That's what we call oversteer. Okay, the first thing about making a car oversteer when it's rear wheel drive and it's got a limited slip differential and quite sticky tyres is it needs more throttle than you think. Okay, I'm going to pitch the car in now to a second gear right-hander. Full throttle now. Look at that, still gripping, and then it goes into oversteer. Okay, so the first thing you have to remember when you're doing this is that you have to use loads of throttle, okay? So, big on the throttle, and then see what we did with the hands then. We move very quickly to counter the oversteer with what we call opposite lock. So I'm going to do that again for you. We're going to go through it. We're going to go full throttle, and then I want you to watch how quickly my hands change on the wheel to catch that oversteer. Here we go, full throttle. Watch how quickly you have to catch the oversteer with your hands. Okay, I'm trying not to cross my hands too much, but I'll take the first amount of lock with 1 armful of lock, okay? At this stage, when you're starting out, don't try and just let go of the wheel. It feels comfortable to do it that way and allow the caster effect of the front wheel just to wash away until it hits the lock stops. You might see me do that in some of my videos. It's lazy, it's not correct, but oddly enough, you earn the right to do it once you've learned how to do it the hard way. That's why I've always viewed it. You can let go of the wheel once you've learned to navigate the wheel first. It's a bit like learning to add up when you were a kid. They wouldn't let you use a calculator until you could do it properly, okay? So, let's have a look at that again. Lots of power, and then equalize it with the steering. And the common mistake is that people are too slow with the throttle and too slow with the steering. It's quite a violent, aggressive activity, this. You watch me, I have to really move quite quickly. See there, we're quick. Quick. So, we've used the throttle quickly, and the reason we've done that is we don't want understeer. If you blend the throttle in nice and gently, what you do is you make the front axle of the car push. And what we're trying to do is excite the car quickly and get into that oversteer as soon as possible. If we allow the car to understeer by blending that throttle in, what happens is we have some understeer coming, we have lock-on countering that, and when the oversteer comes, we're already half a lock round and we've got to catch that extra half a lock. That's just ugly, and the only way really to do it is to let go of the wheels. We don't want that at all. So we're fast on the throttle and we're fast on the steering. So that's the entry to the drift. Let's move to stage 2 of the drift process, maintaining that slide. This is the good bit. This is the really, really fun bit, if you ask me. Get the car into the drift. To sustain it, it's all about power, as Mr. Clarkson would say. You have to throw, listen to that, I'm flat out there, nearly 7,000 revs. The common mistake is that people try and hold back on the power because they can't believe you need to throw so much power at the problem, but you do. Everything at your disposal, just throw it at that back axle and keep going. This thing's got well over 300 horsepower, only a 245 section at the back. It's quite a light, nimble car relatively, and yet you still have to throw so much power to sustain that drift. So keep throwing power at it. With a locking differential at the very worst, you'll just blow most of it away in vaporized tyre. But if you try and hold the throttle back, the car will straighten up. So, if in the first stage of the drift, the most common problem is that people aren't brutal enough with the throttle, it's almost the same in the second stage, maintaining the drift, where they don't quite throw enough power at the problem. I'll show you again. There, I'm now flat out. That's registering 6,500 RPM to maintain that drift. Okay, when you're in the drift in stage 2, for me that's really the point of utter joy, because the car becomes hypersensitive at that point. A little bit more throttle adds more angle, backing out of the throttle straightens the car up, the steering's loaded up, so you can really feel what's going on. There's a tension about the whole car that's super enjoyable. So when you're in the drift, you can play with the car a bit. You can go a bit more angle, a little less. Let's try it. So, I'm going to go for a slightly smaller angle this time. A bit smaller, less steering angle. I was controlling that on the throttle there by using a little less. But it's still almost full throttle. So that's the key thing. Lots of throttle to sustain it, and then it's just a millimetre or two back will suddenly change everything about the car. The pitch, the amount of torque going to the back wheels. It's lovely. You feel really in control. So the final stage, and this is the most difficult bit if you ask me, gathering it all up, getting it from oversteer back to straight. And that's all about your throttle control. So a lot of this comes back to your seating position. I feel you can't actually come off the throttle neatly and accurately unless you're properly located in the seat. Because if you're bracing your leg against the door or the transmission tunnel or something, you're never going to get it right. So when we get the car into the oversteer, to come back out again, we're looking to lead with the throttle, blend out of the throttle, and then use the steering to equalize that back. So here we go. Into the corner now, we're going to try and blend out of this one and make it neat. So we go full throttle to get the slide, and then as we come to the exit, I'm going to back out a little bit there now, and then it's neat. It's lovely. And then it's just a question of winding the lock off to meet the car as it straightens out. I say just a question of, that's the difficult bit, okay? It's balancing the throttle coming back and the lock coming back at the same time. They have to happen in harmony. If you back off the throttle too quickly and don't match the steering, that's a real problem. That's when you get what we call a tank slapper, because the car straightens up violently and quickly, but the steering angle isn't right. The front wheels are not pointing the direction that you want them to be, and the car will spear back the other way. That's the most common cause of the drifting accident. They tend to not happen in the first 2 phases, they happen in the last phase, okay? We'll try it one more time, have a look at the steering, and then straighten up. All happens quite quickly, doesn't it? Now, as with any decent academic paper, there has to be an appendix. And in this case, it's the transition. making the car go one way than the other. That's one of the great joys of drifting. So let's quickly show you that before the end. Okay, so we're going to go around the left-hander and make it go into a right-hander. Okay, so here's the left-hander. So we use coming out of the drift now to make the car back round the other way. Okay, so really what I've done there is at point 3, the third stage in the drift, when I wanted the car to go straight, I've actually been really aggressive on the throttle to pop it the other way. I've gone over the perpendicular and taken it into another drift. And that's called a transition, and that's one of the great joys. It's tricky, and it's a real test of your throttle control. And you'll see I was letting go of the wheel because to navigate through that when it's spinning so quickly, it's quite difficult. So, what I would say is, learn stages 1, 2, and 3, and then when you've got the throttle control for 3, have a go at a transition, because that's a thing of real joy. And this car with this diff in is a little drift monster. I have to say, purely in the interest of filming, I'll have another go at that. Is that all right then? And that, children, is how you drift, okay? But there is a serious message behind this, and I've been hinting at it. You don't do it on the public highway. You make sure your car's in good mechanical condition. You don't do it with people on board who might be scared. Just use your common sense and have fun. Most of all, have fun.